All right, we're back and under the sound of the battle cry. And the name of the message today is the Luciferian connection to social emotional learning, SEL, and emotional intelligence. Now, let me say something right off the bat. This is not going to be wild conspiracy theories, speculation, any of these types of things. So if you think that right up front, I'm going to tell you, no, that's not what this is. I am going to document everything that I say here. And, you see the word Luciferian, you think that's sensational. It's not. In fact, this is even way crazier. It takes a lot to shock me, but some of this stuff was absolutely shocking to me at how insane it is. But it's right there. I'll show you. I'll show you the proof of everything. And when it comes to this topic. So I just wanted to tell you that up front, that this isn't going to be some sensationalist thing where I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm just jumping to conclusions. No, I'll show you. And so we're talking about today social and emotional learning, SEL. That's what it stands for. SEL is everywhere today. It's been around. Basically, it started to, it started developing in the 60s, but really started in the 90s. And it started to get a lot more traction recently in the past decade or so. But it is in all realms of education, K through 12. It is also in colleges and universities, even in private school. It's all over the place. And it's being funded by many different corporations, institutions, the government's involved, United Nations. They all are pushing SEL. And on this, it's very, nefarious because it doesn't sound bad, right? A lot of these words you're going to see today, they don't sound too bad, right? Social and emotional learning and talking about self-awareness and all these things. They're terms and words that all sound innocent or good up front. But what you're going to see is the people who have created these things, define these words in a different way than you would normally think. It's not the normal definition. And their definition is not good at all. It's very bad. SEL is absolutely downright evil. It should not be implemented in any educational institution at all. Okay? And they are doing this to children. It's awful. And it is not just some type of secular educational model either. It absolutely has spiritual connections, spiritual foundations, and they push that on the children, okay? And it's manipulating them, it's brainwashing them, it is indoctrinating them into a certain way of thinking and behaving, which is very bad, okay? So we're going to get into all that today through many different things. This message could have been 5-6 hours if I went down all the crazy rabbit trails. We're not doing that, but I'm going to give you enough to chew on, and you can go look at these things yourself, give you resources that you can go investigate on your own time if you want to go down any of these rabbit holes anymore. Okay, so having said all that, let's get into it. Social and emotional learning. Start off by figuring out what this is and where did it come from. What's the history? So this is from this website, Edutopia, and this article, they give a little bit of a history on where SEL came from. Social and emotional learning, a short history. Teaching the soft skills traditionally associated with conflict resolution and character education has evolved from being considered wishy-washy to being an integral part of educating the whole child. So this article was actually written back in 2011. At a morning meeting in Louisville, Kentucky, a young child sits in a special chair and receives a round of compliments from her classmates. "Thanks for filling my bucket," she tells them. When her teacher asks her why she feels good, she explains with a shy smile, "They were nice to me." Mornings often start with such honest sharing, thoughtful words, and concerned listening to Jefferson County Public Schools, thanks to a district-wide initiative called Care for Kids. The goal is to help teach children how to be empathetic, caring people, and to create a supportive, trusting school environment where they can feel safe and thrive. You see how they always frame this stuff? It makes it sound great. Oh, empathetic and caring people, supportive. And they do that every single time, but it's never what they claim. There's always more to it. Jefferson County is one of several school districts throughout the United States embracing and implementing what's come to be known as social and emotional learning, SEL. Maurice Elias, a psychology professor at Rutgers University and director of the university's Social Emotional Learning Lab, describes SEL as the process through which we learn to recognize and manage emotions, care about others, make good decisions, behave ethically and responsibly, develop positive relationships, and avoid negative behaviors. Sounds great, right? SEL educators and researchers believe that by integrating SEL in schools, we can teach students critical life skills that will not only help their personal development, but also their academic performance as well. When educators foster a caring school environment and teach core social skills, a virtuous cycle develops in which positive interactions beget more positive interactions. All of this creates a culture in which students and teachers respect one another and enjoy being together, further strengthening relationships and motivating both students and teachers to do their best. Great. Now, let's get into the history here. Because then we're going to go to another article that's going to give more of a breakdown as to what exactly this is. But this is to start off the history. An ancient concept. This is what they claim. As with many Western ideas, the roots of SEL are as old as ancient Greece. When Plato wrote about education in the Republic, he proposed a holistic curriculum that requires a balance of training in physical education, the arts, math, science, character, and moral judgment. That has nothing to do with SEL. This is they're claiming, oh yeah, this is just like what Plato wrote about. No, it's not. Not true at all. By maintaining a sound system of education and upbringing, you produce citizens of good character, he explained. Preparing children to be responsible, productive, caring, and engaged citizens is a timeless pursuit that continues to be the goal of education today. How best to do this in our modern school system, however, is a relatively recent and still evolving area of study and practice. And it's the main question the SEL movement seeks to answer. Okay, so let's look at the history here. Get into some interesting stuff. Modern origins in New Haven. In the late 60s, during his early days at Yale School of Medicine's Child Studies Center, James Comer began piloting a program called the Comer School Development Program. It was, as he wrote later in a 1988 Scientific American article, centered on his speculation that the contrast between a child's experiences at home and those in school deeply affects the child's psychosocial development, and that this in turn shapes academic achievement. Okay, so the very early stages of SEL being developed started back in the 60s at Yale with Comer. The school development program focused on two poor, low-achieving, predominantly African-American elementary schools in New Haven, Connecticut that had the worst attendance and the lowest academic achievement in the city. With help from the program, the schools established a collaborative management team composed of teachers, parents, and the principal, and a mental health worker. The team made decisions on issues ranging from the school's academic and social programs to how to change school procedures that seemed to be engendering behavior problems. By the early 1980s, academic performance at the two schools exceeded the national average, and truancy and behavior problems had declined, adding momentum to the nascent SEL movement. And we'll move on to the next phase. A movement takes off. New Haven became the de facto hub of SEL research and included active researchers who would become key figures in the movement, such as Roger P. Weisberg, a professor of psychology at Yale, and Timothy Shriver, a Yale graduate and educator in the New Haven public schools. Weisberg and Shriver worked closely together between 1987 and 1992, along with local educators, to establish the K-12 New Haven Social Development Program. Within that same period came the W.T. Grant Consortium on the school-based promotion of social competence, a project funded by the W.T. Grant Foundation and co-chaired by Weisberg and Maurice Elias. This group of leading school-based prevention experts and youth development experts released a framework for incorporating social and emotional learning in schools. And the group listed the emotional skills necessary for emotional competence as identifying and labeling feelings, expressing feelings, assessing the intensity of feelings, managing feelings, delaying gratification, controlling impulses, and reducing stress. As you can see, they care a lot about feelings in education as far as the SEL curriculum goes. In 1994, here we go. That's what we need to get to. In 1994, as the term social emotional learning was making its way into the lexicon, the organization CASEL, this is what we're going to focus on, was created under its original name, the Collaborative to Advance Social and Emotional Learning. They're the main group who propelled this into the mainstream. Okay, they funded it. They're the main group pushing SEL. That same year, the Fetzer Institute, we'll talk about them later. Believe me, we will talk about them. That same year, the Fetzer Institute hosted the first CASEL conference with researchers, educators, child advocates, and others in the field. These people were working on various projects that aim to prevent violence and drug use in schools and to promote healthy choices, school-community connections, and generally responsible behavior. 9 CASEL collaborators co-authored Promoting Social and Emotional Learning Guidelines for Educators, published by ASCD in 1997, which established and defined the field. Okay? Now, before we read a little bit more, we're going to go over to the CASEL website, because now we have something I want you to remember for later, though. We established right here, when they're talking about the history, it said the Fetzer Institute hosted the first CASEL conference with researchers, educators, child advocates, and others in the field. Okay? So I want you to see that connection between CASEL, SEL, and the Fetzer Institute, because we're going to come back to them later. But now we're going to go to the CASEL website, and they're going to tell us exactly what SEL is, and you're going to see there's more to this than you at first you would think by just hearing some of these words, okay? Okay, so now we're at the CASEL website, okay? This is casel.org, and they're going to define what SEL is. And what you're going to see is this is a lot more in-depth than you would ever suspect. So let's get into this article. It's not that long. And then we're going to look at another one from their website, and you're going to see some pretty interesting stuff. What is the CASEL framework? A framework creates a foundation for applying evidence-based SEL strategies to your community. Okay? Our SEL framework, known by many as the CASEL Wheel, helps cultivate skills and environments that advance students' learning and development. Schools, districts, states, and others can use CASEL's framework to foster knowledge, skills, and attitudes across 5 areas of social and emotional competence, establish equitable learning environments. I'm going to talk about that word in a second, because they use that word equity again in the next article. It doesn't mean equality, by the way. You would be wrong if you thought that. Establish equitable learning environments and coordinate practices across 4 key settings that support students' social, emotional, and academic development. Our framework provides a foundation for communities to use evidence-based SEL strategies in ways that are most meaningful to their local context. It can be applied to many different priorities and aligned with each community's strengths, needs, and cultures. And just talk about downloading some framework and all this stuff. Now, this is the CASEL Wheel, okay? Interactive CASEL Wheel. Engage with our interactive wheel by selecting a competency or setting to learn more. So they have 5 parts to this CASEL Wheel when it comes to SEL. And the 5 points for SEL are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, social awareness. Now, again, on the surface, these things don't sound that bad. Sounds like, okay, these are some skills that kids need to learn to better interact with other people in healthy relationships and have a healthy environment for learning and all these types of things. But you would be wrong, because that's not what it means. Okay? What this is, as we will show, is really neo-Marxism. Okay? I said neo-Marxism because it's not exactly Marxism. If you go back to the old school Marxism, it's been through many different iterations over history. We know that. There is also the Frankfurt School, and where they came up with critical theory. It's not just critical race theory. That's just one aspect of critical theory. And so if you actually want to get down to the essence of all this crazy stuff going on, the woke stuff, you could distill it down to the phrase critical consciousness. That's what woke is. And that all of these words, these phrases that they use, are defined through the lens and the framework of critical consciousness, this Marxist worldview. That is how they're defined. And we're going to show that in a little bit. Okay? Just remember that. And like I said, please watch all the way through, because we're going to get to some other crazier stuff and the spiritual stuff later. Social emotional learning, SEL, is an integral part of education and human development. SEL is the process through which all young people and adults acquire and apply the knowledge, skills, and attitudes to develop healthy identities, manage emotions, and achieve personal and collective goals. Feel and show empathy to others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. SEL advances educational equity. There it is again. And remember that. Excellence through authentic school family community, partnerships to establish learning environments, and experiences that feature trusting and collaborative relationships, rigorous and meaningful curriculum and instruction, and ongoing evaluation. SEL can help address various forms of inequity and empower young people and adults to co-create thriving schools and contribute to safe, healthy, and just communities. So when they say inequity and they talk about equity, it can help address various forms of inequity and empower young people. They're talking about making children activists. Okay? Woke activists, left-wing activists is what we're talking about. Now, I'm going to add to that here. Skip down here. I'm going to show you something. Key settings here. Look at this. This is going to take it to the next level, and you're going to see what I'm talking about. We take a systemic approach that emphasizes the importance of establishing equitable learning environments and coordinating practices across key settings of classrooms, schools, families, and communities to enhance all students' social, emotional, and academic learning. Quality implementation of well-designed, evidence-based classroom programs and practices is a foundational element of effective SEL. We believe it is most beneficial to integrate SEL throughout the school's academic curricula and culture across the broader context of school-wide practices and policies, and through ongoing collaboration with families and community organizations. These coordinated efforts should foster youth voice, agency, and engagement. This is activism again. Establish supportive classroom and school climates and approaches to discipline. Enhance adult SEL competence and establish authentic family and community partnerships. Okay? Now, check out this next paragraph. Okay? Students, families, schools, and communities are all part of broader systems that shape learning, development, and experiences. Okay, so stop right there real quick. Students, families, schools, communities. See how they group all those together? They don't have a specific sphere of authority for families, right? The parents and the children. And then a separate institution of the schools. Students go to those schools. And then a separate, category for communities. No. To them, in the SEL framework, those are all grouped together in the same basket. It says they're all part of the same system: students, families, schools, communities. And so whenever schools are teaching students something, or parents are teaching students something, or communities, they all have to think about the broader aspect of the community. And as you'll see, um, it eventually is to be talking about being a global citizen. That's talked about a lot in these types of curriculum. But let's continue. Inequities based on race, ethnicity, class, language, gender identity, sexual orientation, and other factors are deeply ingrained in the vast majority of these systems and impact student and adult social, emotional, and academic learning. Now, do you see what I'm talking about here? Now, listen. First of all, remember, this is on the CASEL website. They are the authority for SEL. And in their definition of SEL, they are including this paragraph, which says there are inequities based on these things like gender identity and sexual orientation. And these inequities are what? Deeply ingrained in the vast majority of these systems and impact students and adult social, emotional, academic learning. So what are they talking about? They're saying the families have bad views, inequitable views. Some of the teachers, people in community, all these people can have inequitable views about gender identity, sexual orientation, race, all this stuff. So they're saying they have bad views about these subjects. And so SEL has to fix that. And so we have to directly indoctrinate the children to show them, hey, your parents, any other adult that you come across that has a viewpoint that's against what we're teaching about race and gender identity, sexual orientation, all these things, if they have any views that go against what we're teaching, it is to be seen as bad, which is inequitable. And they teach the children that from K through 12, very young children, they're teaching them this stuff. Coming home talking about pronouns. While SEL alone will not solve long-standing and deep-seated inequities in the education system, it can create the conditions needed for individuals and schools to examine and interrupt inequitable policies and practices, create more inclusive learning environments, and reveal and nurture the interests and assets of all individuals. And what that means is they will find everyone that is teaching anything that goes against their framework, and they will attack them as hateful, as bigots, as having inequitable biases and all these things, and they'll say it's wrong. They need to change their views, and if they don't, that's why they're going directly to the children, so that the children learn from a young age to view the world through the SEL lens, which is really neo-Marxist lens, okay? Where everything is always critically examined. To critically examine things is always trying to find problems with everything. And that's why they always say, this is problematic, that's problematic, your views are problematic. Your view on family and patriarchy and gender and all these things, that's all problematic views. And we need to address that and protest against it. We need to have activism that addresses these inequities and problems. And then we need to change it. And it never ends. They're constantly changing and wanting to overthrow everything. And so this has nothing to do with real education. It is about indoctrinating children to become woke Marxist, neo-Marxist activists who examine everything through the lens of critical consciousness with the desire to tear everything down. And that's what they're doing. Everything that has to do with traditional morality, especially. Now, so that's on the, this article, Let's go to the next one on Casel, and then we're going to move on to some even crazier stuff. Okay, so we're on the Casel website again, and this article is called Transformative SEL. This is like, you know, the latest iteration of SEL, transformative SEL. And look at what it says right in the beginning. Casel is committed to advancing equity and excellence in education through social and emotional learning. Okay, so they advance equity through SEL. That's what they say. Okay, so we're going to jump off here real quick, and I'm going to show you how equity is actually defined in this woke academic social justice context. Okay, so right now we're on this the Brandeis University website, and they have an article about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this says, actually, this is specifically called Our Social Justice Definitions. Okay? So what you need to see here is whenever they use a term, they have a specific social justice definition for that term. So we're going to scroll down here. You can see anti-racist, BIPOC, all this stuff. And then we get to the word equity. Okay? So if you would think, oh, it just means equal, right? Equality, treating everyone equally. That's not what it means. And you would be wrong if you thought that. And so, because you would think, oh, well, what's wrong with that? Treat everyone equally. We should have equality. Well, let's look what they say. The notion of being fair and impartial as an individual engages with an organization or system, particularly systems of grievance, equity is often conflated with the term equality, meaning sameness. So they're going to tell you right now, it does not mean equality. In fact, true equity implies that an individual may need to experience or receive something different, not equal, in order to maintain fairness and access. For example, a person with a wheelchair may need differential access to an elevator relative to someone else. See diversity and inclusion. And they give a source here. Equity, Encyclopedia of Diversity and Social Justice, Volume 1, from Morton B. and Fashing Varner K. Okay, you see the reference here. But anyways, this is how they define equity. So what it means is not equality of opportunity, not treating everyone equally with respect, and all these other types of things. It has nothing to do with that. It's equality of outcome. And so that's why you see the messing with everything. That's how you get affirmative action and all these other policies that seem like they're going to help people, but they actually end up hurting people and messing everything up. You know, it'd be like if there were multiple tall buildings in a city, and you're like, well, we're going to make it all equal. Instead of, if you were going to build a building, well, instead of building a building to be as tall as everyone else, you cut all the tall buildings down to make it short like the one that you want. And so it's always making everyone else conform to it. It's like the transgender thing. Well, everyone else in the world has to conform to their view of the world and has to say certain words to them, or else you're hateful and bigoted and all these things. Instead of teaching them to deal with the world and say, hey, not everyone is going to, believe and agree with what you're doing, and not everyone has to conform to what you want and what you believe. Okay? But that's what equity is. It says everybody has to conform to this crazy woke nonsense and critical consciousness. Okay? So it's equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. All right, so now we're back at the transformative SEL article. And now that you know what they mean by equity, you can pick up on that when they're talking about it. SEL is founded on the premise that every child can receive an education that fully supports their learning and development so they can achieve their goals and contribute to their communities. See how they're always talking about communities. Unfortunately, some students are not currently experiencing opportunities and environments that maximize their learning potential. Patterns across all types of educational data show differences in students' learning experiences and outcomes based on, listen to this, students' socioeconomic status, race, zip code, home language, disability status, and other factors. And they just keep filtering it through these languages, and they lie over and over again. And they're constantly doing these surveys, by the way, that they asked children tons of questions. It was highly invasive. In fact, do you know how crazy this is? They're actually doing data harvesting with children. And they're actually having, not only are they doing these invasive surveys where children answer insane amounts of questions over and over and over again, which they give up personal information about their families and how much their parents make for money and all these personal things going on at their home. They give information on surveys. They also now are doing apps where children are inputting information into apps. And guess what? The corporations and governments are harvesting data points about children through this stuff. And SEL is helping to implement that. I'm not joking, not making that up. You go look it up. And in fact, it gets even crazier. They're actually coming up with things where they put devices on children to measure their emotional reactions to things, what the temperature is of their body, how their heart reacts, the temperature of their skin, all these other types of things, trying to study how they react to certain situations and hearing certain things. I mean, it's totally insane. Let's continue. Given these gaps, CASEL has been working with educators, families, and researchers to identify and study innovative SEL strategies that better support every student's strengths and aspirations, deepen partnerships among families, schools, and communities. See how they always do that? It's not because, by the way, in this worldview, in the SEL worldview, families, parents do not have authority over their children. And they're trying to teach the children, no, it's not the most important thing is you get your main worldview and morals and traditions that you learned from your parents. No. You have to always think about your community, everyone else at school in your community, and their values. We all have to conform to that. And help close longstanding gaps in educational opportunities and outcomes. Outcomes. That's the equity. We describe these efforts as transformative SEL. Okay. Let's go down here a little bit. All right, skip down here. I'm going to show you a couple more things, and then we're going to move on. What is transformative SEL? Transformative SEL is a form of SEL implementation where young people and adults build strong, respectful, lasting relationships to engage in co-learning. It facilitates critical examination of individual and contextual factors that contribute to inequities and collaborative solutions that lead to personal, community, and societal well-being. Always got to think about the collective, right? Community and society. Through TSEL, Transformative SEL, students and adults develop social and emotional skills needed for school and community engagement, with a focus on rights and responsibilities for creating learning environments that are caring and just. And it talks about identity, agency, belonging, collaborative problem solving, and curiosity. All part of the SEL approach. And one of the things they do here is, watering down words, which is awful. Just look at this in identity. Identity, a core part of self-awareness, which refers to how students and adults view themselves as individuals and as part of the world around them. Yeah, because they're transforming the identity of these children to conform with the identity that they want them to have, to how they want to view themselves. Having a healthy sense of identity buffers against negative or traumatic experiences and contributes to positive academic, social, and emotional outcomes. The reason I read that is because when they use the word traumatic here, this drives me insane because, okay, there are actually, traumatic experiences that people go through, extreme, abuse, childhood physical abuse. People go through traumatic experiences in war, seeing death and lots of things like that. It's traumatic experiences. Those actually exist, and they do have a big impact on people. But the problem with the way that they use it is they water down all these terms, and then all these they apply these terms to so many things that you wouldn't normally consider traumatic. And it's going to be like, talking about some events that they went through in society. Oh, that was traumatic, and this was traumatic, and this event in history was traumatic, and everything becomes traumatic. And I've had a traumatic experience, so then we need to talk about how we feel and how it affects us and all these other things. And it just becomes a mess. But it's just another tool to manipulate them into this SEL framework. And by the way, none of this has anything to do with actual teaching children actual skills that they need to function in society and in the workplace, such as math and science, reading, writing, and all these things. Think about how much time they're spending on all this stuff instead of all the other types of education that they should be spending it on. It's wasting so much time on this because it's focused on turning them into activists. That's all it is. And just to end this section, before we move on, check this out. What does transformative SEL look like in practice? Transformative SEL grew out of developmental science and research on students' engagement, well-being, academic achievement, and long-term success. But in practice, there are currently limited options for evidence-based programs and implementation models for transformative SEL. To address this need, CASEL is leading collaborative efforts with partner organizations to learn alongside students, families, schools, and districts how specific practices, policies, and processes can best be implemented to achieve the goals of transformative SEL. So look at this. I'm just going to show you like 2 examples. Okay? Practices that we are learning about include, we skip down here a little bit. Opportunities, instruction. Yeah, lived experiences is another phrase that they use over and over again. It's absolutely neo-marxist garbage. This one right here. Developmentally appropriate learning opportunities that engage students and adults in examining current and historical events, social norms, prejudices, and biases, and how issues of race, class, and culture impact our society. This is Marxist garbage. That's all that is. Plain as day, right in your face. Next point, opportunities for youth to use their voice and skills to examine inequities and create solutions for social change, social justice, making them an activist. That's what this is all about. Okay, and you can see that over and over and over again. And so you see that all through the curriculum in SEL. And trust me, it goes on and on and on. We could sit here for hours going through all the academic papers, the literature talking about what SEL teaches. It is actually very in-depth. And so I highly suggest you go look into it more on your own. I'm just giving you an overview and showing you that there's more to this than you would think and that it is not good. It's not innocent. Absolutely not. And this is pushing kids to become neo-Marxist activists through critical consciousness. Okay, so let's continue. Okay, so now that you have a pretty good basic understanding of SEL and what it's really all about, now I'm going to take it to the next level. I'm going to show you that this isn't just something that's a type of a framework that's being pushed in the educational system in the United States, and that's it. And that's just all this is, Marxist activists in the United States. No, it's even bigger than that. Now we're going to look at is a document from UNESCO. UNESCO is United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It's basically the educational arm of the United Nations, they talk about SEL. They love SEL and they push SEL. But why? And you're going to see here, they'll tell you. And if you know how to interpret what they're saying correctly, you can see that it is absolutely very nefarious. So let's look at this. It's called SEL for SDGs, Why Social and Emotional Learning, SEL, is necessary to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So that's SDGs. Okay, Sustainable Development Goals. And we'll take a look down here. And let's get this thing zoomed in. Okay, so what I want you to notice is right at the beginning, they make this point before they start where they say the article builds a case for how the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals can be achieved through social and emotional learning. You see that? So the United Nations wants to achieve their goals through SEL. They tell you right up front. There's no hiding this. So let's look at it. The Sustainable Development Goals are not necessarily a set of consistent objectives, but rather a series of potentially conflicting goals. From the perspective of the development agent, these conflicting objectives entail inconsistencies in actions and antecedents needed to attain the SDGs. For example, eradicating poverty, a societal objective, might entail, at least in the short term, working the self to the point of compromising personal well-being, another SDG. Another clear example of such conflicts is the slow progress or even resistance to climate change policies because of the relationship across work choice, economic growth, and climate change. Thus, attainment of these goals may necessitate a balancing act. Development agents may consider multiple options and make trade-offs. Okay, so let's talk about that. Okay, what about the first point they made? Oh, eradicating poverty, a societal objective. Okay, and they say it might entail working the self to the point of compromising personal well-being. So you might need to work yourself to the bone to help eradicate poverty. And it might not be good, you might not like it at first, but you have to think about how, hey, this is for a higher goal, a sustainable development goal. And you'll notice whenever they have a goal, people, the lower classes always have to make compromises in their life. They have to sacrifice. They have to give up things. And also a lot of times they do these totally insane things that make no sense, but they say, no, but you need to understand that it actually does make sense in the long term. There was an article I saw where it said they had to burn 16 million trees to fight climate change. Burn the trees, save the planet. Oh, someone might say, oh, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? Oh, climate change. That's what we're fighting. And you don't understand in the long term it's going to help everything, okay? So just shut up and go along with what we're saying. And that's why they're going to talk about next dissonance. Cognitive dissonance. They actually talk about how they can overcome people's resistance to these goals. So take a look at this. At the level of the individual and social collectives, these trade-offs and SDGs will be quite taxing because the conflicting goals are, in effect, inconsistent cognitions, generally referred to as cognitive dissonance or dissonance. According to dissonance theory, one of the most tried and tested theories in the behavioral sciences, inconsistent cognitions evokes aversive arousal state that leads to attitudes and behaviors aimed at reducing the arousal. Okay? When you have two conflicting viewpoints, it leads your mind to try to reconcile them together. Even if they can't be reconciled, people try to reconcile them together. Okay? And this is what you see the libs doing all the time. Trying to reconcile things that don't make any sense. Dissonance is constituted by two important social psychological processes: inconsistency among cognitions, a more rational phenomenon referred to as cognitive discrepancy, and the unpleasant emotional and motivational state that arises from holding two contradictory cognitions referred to as dissonance. And so you're going to see, you might think, oh, what is it? What is this mumbo jumbo? No, you're going to see. You are going to see how insane this is. And how it's, remember, this is part of the indoctrination that they're pushing on children through SEL. That's what you got to understand. Dissonance is unpleasant. The aversive arousal state is because inconsistent cognitions impede effective and unconflicted actions. Okay? So they're saying dissonance can impede action. That's why they're trying to overcome the dissonance, because they want activists who take action. See that? The unpleasant emotive state of dissonance motivates attitude changes or engagements in other dissonance reduction processes. Hence, encounters with dissonance trigger a variety of dissonance-reducing cognitions. Attitudes and behaviors that align cognitions with behavioral commitments to facilitate the execution of effective, unconflicting actions. For example, stay with me. It has been widely demonstrated that following a dissonance-triggered decision, people alter their attitudes to be more consistent with their choices. This is the case because following a dissonance-triggered decision, psychological processes are deployed to assist with the execution of the decision. This process involves post-decision views of the chosen alternative in a more favorable light and the rejected option in a more negative light, so as to help the individual follow through and act on the decision in a more effective manner. Okay, so pay attention to this next point. Dissonance has important implications for the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, so remember that. They're saying that this stands in the way of them attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. It strains development agents' rational cognitive discrepancy and emotional capabilities to reflect, self-regulate, and act in pursuit of the attainment of those goals. So they're calling people development agents. Okay, so keep that in mind. But just look at this section here, and then I'm going to skip down to some other stuff, and I want to show you. These strains may undermine attainment of those goals. Okay. See that? These may undermine attainment of those goals. They're concerned about that. For example, if development agents view an otherwise prioritized development goal in a more negative light because it conflicts with an otherwise less prioritized goal, but that they favor at that moment, the former may be jeopardized. See, they're worried that, our development goal may be jeopardized if the person has a viewpoint, a worldview that conflicts with that goal. So we need to find out how we can overcome that. And additionally, because dissonance challenges both cognitive and emotional capabilities, it might be self-defeating, leading to inaction. And they want people to take action, discouraging actions in pursuit of the SDGs. In contrast, because dissonance prompts development agents to reflect on their values and other behavioral antecedents and to self-regulate the unpleasant emotive state, it is a necessary aspect of measured, deliberative, sustainable development actions because it obligates the development agent to weigh options and make decisions. Thus, dissonance has considerable implications for how we understand and manage individual and social actions that enable attainment of the SDGs. Okay, so I want you to see how they're talking about using this. Okay, so they say that dissonance, we can't get rid of dissonance, so it has two sides to it. So we have to learn how to manage it. And they say, because they say it can get in the way of attaining our goals, we posit two specific avenues: emotional resilience and pro-social behavior. That's another word you have to see has been totally captured. Every word resilience has been captured by them. And then also you see this pro-social behavior for managing dissonance and attainment of the sustainable development goals. While dissonance is a core motivation for maintaining coherent thinking, subsequent actions to achieving the SDGs necessarily depend on the cultivation of both emotional resilience and pro-social skills. So they have to promote that. Well, how are they going to do that? All right, now let me show you how they're manipulating through these terms, emotional resilience and pro-social behavior. So basically with emotional resilience, they say, this is the ability to regulate your emotional response to things, mindfully self-regulate, all this stuff. It's right. On the surface, it sounds, okay, that's fine, but it's not fine. Because what it means is whenever there's something that is in line with their goals, sustainable development goals, social justice issues, and it might make that person upset, they need their emotional resilience teaches them to calm down and accept whatever is going on and the thing that they're pushing, the social justice cause, even if it seems negative to them instinctually. They got to stuff that down and accept it. And then on the flip side, the pro-social behavior, that's more when they're agitated and they're pushing for action. Okay, that's pushing them for activism. They do protest, these types of things. That's pro-social behavior. So, because you think about that, they're not emotionally accepting something. So that's not emotionally resilient. Instead, it's saying, no, I'm upset. That's why they say even rioting. Remember, they've said rioting is the language of the unheard. And but only when certain groups of people do it. When other people do it, then they're disgusting, terrorist, evil people, right? So it's all in the context of what's in line with their goals. So as you can see, it all depends on the situation, right? There's no such thing as truth to them. Everything's relative. There's no objective standard for truth. It's just whatever they say, you have to play by their rules and their definitions. And that's why and it's so crazy and none of it makes sense. That's why they have to educate children in this from a very young age so they can learn all these things. It's like learning another language, okay? And that brings us back to SEL, where they say right here, social and emotional learning as fundamental skills. Social and emotional learning, SEL has emerged as competencies through which individuals recognize and regulate emotions, identify positive purpose, demonstrate empathy for others, take constructive action, and promote human flourishing. With origins in emotional intelligence, we'll talk about that in a little bit, SEL skills are powerful competencies since they have been shown to facilitate learning, build emotional resilience, promote pro-social behavior, and instill pluralistic thinking. Which that means accepting everything else in the world except for biblical Christianity. So, but notice here, they said SEL will be used to push emotional resilience and pro-social behavior, which helps them to facilitate and achieve their sustainable development goals. And that's how they're going to use SEL to do that. Now, I really want you to pay attention to this the most out of everything we talked about so far in this document. This is going to cut through all the nonsense, and it's going to make you see very clearly what they're actually talking about here. Because I know it kind of gets confusing sometimes, but let me show you really simply what they're saying here. Look at this part where it says dissonance and EMC squared. They're talking about empathy, mindfulness, compassion, and critical inquiry. Okay? But now watch what they say about dissonance. Since dissonance is an unpleasant emotive state, subjects of dissonance require emotion regulatory capabilities, emotional resilience, to navigate the behaviors and prerequisite antecedents to attain sustainable development goals. Listen to this. Dissonance can be caused by beliefs, attitudes, values, and feelings about oneself, others, or the environment. Thus, interventions to reduce dissonance are required to address the cognitive antecedents of emotion. the intensity of emotional response, and the cognitive regulation of this emotional response. These can be achieved by combined training of empathy and mindfulness to build skills for emotional resilience or regulation. Now, what does that mean? Very clearly, what it means is they said dissonance can get in the way of achieving the SDGs, right? And then they say dissonance can be caused by beliefs, attitudes, and values about oneself, others, and the environment. Okay, so what are they talking about? What beliefs, attitudes, and values? Well, I don't know. Maybe like traditional morality. How about Christianity, biblical beliefs about the world, about men and women, about all these different things? And what they're saying is when you have those beliefs and then you hear about the sustainable development goals and the policies they want to implement, you have an emotional response. And they say, we can't have people have this dissonance, this emotional response that's a negative emotion against these, hearing these things. So we need to take out of the way the beliefs that cause the dissonance in the emotional response. Okay, so how do they do that? Well, they indoctrinate your children so that they don't believe what you believe. No more traditional morality, no Christianity, no biblical values, none of that. That's all educated out of them through SEL. So they have new attitudes, new beliefs, new values, new feelings, which have nothing to do with their parents. And it's more about what is good for the environment, for the climate, for social justice, for all these things. That's what they want. And they're telling you in this academic language exactly what they're doing through SEL. All right, I'm going to read this last paragraph about SEL, and then now we're going to move on to the crazy spiritual stuff. SEL education and the SDGs. The question we ask ourselves is, how can we develop these competencies? One such avenue could be our formal education system. Recent experiences with SEL in schools show promise in improving pro-social behavior and inculcate actions that go beyond just the self, they hate individuality, but towards the collective good. See that? What is that? Communism. That's all that is. Simple as. It's straight there. This, however, suggests a radical change in our education systems. They've already been doing that change. We are advocating here for a whole brain approach to our education systems, whereby the focus shifts from purely building intellectual intelligence to one where there is a balance of both intellectual and emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence means actually indoctrinating this SEL garbage so they become neo-marxist activists who do the bidding of United Nations as global citizens and everything they want to implement through that. That's what it means. Okay? So there you go. That's from the United Nations, UNESCO document, talking about how they're using SEL to achieve their goals. All right, so now we're going to go back to the history we were reading about from the Edutopia article. And we read about how, SEL came out of KSOL. And it says then the same year, the Fetzer Institute hosted the first KSOL conference with researchers, educators, and child advocates. And then also, we see here the concept of SEL was propelled into popular culture in 1995 with a book by New York Times science reporter Daniel Goleman. We're going to be talking about him. With support from Fetzer, Goleman published Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ, in which he argued that character matters and, more significantly, the skills that build character can be taught. Okay, so we're talking about emotional intelligence and Daniel Goleman after, but I'm showing you Fetzer helps Goleman to publish his book. Fetzer Institute was directly related with KSOL, and in fact, on the board as well with KSOL, member from that Fetzer Institute. They were, SEL would not exist without the Fetzer Institute, okay? SEL and Fetzer funded all these. They funded Goldman, they funded Kasel, all these things wouldn't exist without Fetzer, okay? And so Fetzer Institute, let's look at that, because that's where we're going to get, into some real interesting stuff. So Fetzer Institute, based in Kalamazoo, Michigan, was founded by broadcast pioneer and Detroit Tigers baseball team owner John E. Fetzer. And we're going to be looking into this guy because, wow, he has some crazy beliefs. He formed the Institute to support work designed to discover and enhance the integral relationships of the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions of experience, which foster human growth, action, and responsible improvement of the human and cosmic condition. Okay, so there's one more thing. Down here, it says Fetzer provided funding through the 1990s towards Daniel Goleman's seminal work on emotional intelligence and the establishment of the field of social and emotional learning. Okay, so this is said multiple times, is well documented. There is no denying the Fetzer Institute connection and thereby therefore the connection to John Fetzer. Okay, so let's look at this guy. All right, so we're going to start with here. There was an article in Detroit Free Press called How Psychics, Ouija Boards Played into Tigers World Series Win. Came out in 2018. And it says, when Detroit Tigers won the World Series 50 years ago last fall, almost no one understood the quirky inclinations of the team's soft-spoken owner, John Fetzer. Even fewer cared in 1984 when the Tigers won a second World Series, this time under a new owner, Tom Monahan. Yet the low-key Fetzer was still the Tigers club chairman. Clearly, it was Fetzer who had built that second team of champions. Today, Johnny Fetzer lives in the memory of a few aging fans, but more tangibly inside a large triangular building near Kalamazoo, closed to the public and dedicated to Fetzer's secret life. He was a closet spiritualist. This super wealthy owner of television and radio stations was a lifelong believer in the power of mind over matter and his own intuition, and a lot more than that. A new book says that Fetzer relied all his life on what he felt was a powerful personal gift of intuition, as he picked superb business managers to develop his broadcasting empire, and as he chose the baseball personnel to grasp 2 World Series wins. The book reveals that Fetzer made major decisions based on many forms of intuition, from his Ouija board to dowsing rods to psychics to directives he believed came from his past lives. That's not intuition, that's called divination. It goes on to say, Fetzer was raised a Seventh-day Adventist, a sect founded in Battle Creek in 1863, Ellen G. White. As a young man, he rejected those teachings and began a mystical journey, beginning in 1930s through such arcane disciplines as Freemasonry, Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, and Theosophy. In the 1950s, Fetzer's path broadened into a fascination with UFOs, unorthodox science, and the paranormal. Then it shifted to New Age religious experiences that Fetzer, always seen formally dressed, explored in common with long-haired hippies in the 60s and 70s. Finally, he took an anti-establishment turn in the 80s, toward alternative care methods and energy medicine. Throughout much of his life, just as was said about Nancy Reagan during the years her husband was president, Fetzer was in frequent contact with psychics, principally the nationally famous Gene Dixon, who claimed to have predicted the JFK assassination. So he was even in contact with that famous psychic. But there is much more to this story. Okay, so what we have here is actually a lot of detail. We're not going to read all of it because this document's like 238 pages. So we're just going to read a little bit of it. But it's called The Beaver Memos. Came out in 2017, made by Tom Beaver. He actually took care of Fetzer's documents. And it says, The Life and Legacy of John Fetzer, a series of memos researched and compiled by Don Beaver, Johnny Fetzer Memorial Trustee. Okay? So this is officially put out by the Fetzer Institute, by a trustee. Okay, so This is not speculation. They just admit this stuff right here, all the beliefs of Fetzer. And trust me, you're not ready for how insane it is. Okay, so let's check this out. I'm just going to read this first paragraph here from the preface by Brian C. Wilson, professor of American Religious History, Department of Comparative Religion, Western Michigan University. He says this: I am pleased to have been asked to write a brief introduction to Tom Beaver's collected memos on the spiritual legacy of John E. Fetzer. During my own research into the lifetimes and spiritual development of John Fetzer, I have found Tom's memos to contain a wealth of information and insights, all of which have considerably deepened my appreciation for this complex and fascinating figure. John Fetzer and the Institute he founded were the products of many influences, several of which were esoteric in origin. You see that? Fetzer and the Institute, the Fetzer Institute, were products of esoteric influences. But given Fetzer's private nature, few suspected the breadth of his spiritual explorations or were in a position to recognize the various strands from which Fetzer wove his metaphysical worldview. One who did, however, was Tom Beaver, who from personal study and experience, not to mention his close friendship with the man, understood very well where Fetzer was coming from and where he wished to go in his spiritual journey. Okay, so Tom Beaver is the authority on Fetzer's beliefs. And so check out what he documented. Look at this from the foreword. Throughout his lifetime, John E. Fetzer pursued what is commonly referred to as the journey of a spiritual seeker. His spiritual journey was serious and intentional. It spanned nearly his whole life, and over the course of his long life, this journey kept changing and progressing, generally from more outer forms of searching to more inner forms involving meditation practice, right up until he took his last breath just short of his 90th birthday. This journey of searching led him down a myriad of, it shouldn't say a myriad, by the way, down myriad of metaphysical and esoteric trails, including major efforts involving, now listen to what he was involved in. Ready? 55 years of regularly sitting before fortune tellers, mediums, psychics, and channelers who he believed were able to communicate on his behalf with the other side. 55 years as a Freemason, culminating in his earning the Masonic Scottish Rite's highest degree, the 33rd degree of Freemasonry. A multi-decade study of the various books of theosophy. We'll be looking at that in a second. With emphasis on the writings of Alice Bailey and the theosophically inspired series Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East by Bard T. Spalding, a 10-year study of A Course in Miracles beginning in the mid-70s, initiation into meditation practices beginning in his mid-70s, transcendental meditation in the mid-70s, and as his culminating practice, initiation into the Surat Shad Yoga meditation practice in 1985 via the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness, or MSIA. Now, he says, while John Fetzer's beliefs were not imposed upon the Fetzer Institute trustees or employees, but he exhorted his trustees regarding spiritual practice in the 80s, and his spiritual notions certainly became the underpinnings of the spiritual principles upon which the Institute's philosophy have been based. See that? There is no conspiracy theory here. The Fetzer Institute, he just said, is based on John Fetzer's philosophy, being a 33rd degree Freemason, going to fortune tellers and psychics, and being into theosophy, the writings of Alice Bailey and also Blavatsky and all the others. There it is. There's no conspiracy about this theory, I should say. It is a conspiracy. It's not a theory. Okay? And what does that mean? What that means is Fetzer Institute cannot be disconnected from the history and the foundation of SEL. Now, before we talk more about that. Let's learn a little bit more about theosophy, because that's some pretty wild stuff. I'm just going to read a little bit here from my notes here. This is actually from another teaching I did, C.S. Lewis, Occult Connections. But theosophy, founded by Blavatsky, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, heralded the dawn of the New Age movement. Her writings are the foundation for many occult fraternities. After publishing monumental works such as Isis Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine, the Theosophical Society was formed to spread her teachings worldwide. She claimed to receive her revelations from secret chiefs or disembodied ascended masters who claimed to be aiding humanity to evolve into a race of supermen. Freemasonry took notice, and many soon proclaimed her an occult genius, such as Manly P. Hall. And by the way, Beaver said that Fetzer had many Manly P. Hall books. And Manly Hall said, "The Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled are Madame Blavatsky's gifts to humanity. And to those whose vision can pierce the menacing clouds of imminent disaster, it is no exaggeration to affirm that these writings are the most vital literary contribution to the modern world. No more can they be compared with other books than can the light of the sun be compared with the lamp of the glowworm. The Secret Doctrine assumes the dignity of Scripture." Wow. Manly P. Hall certainly had a high view of Blavatsky and her writings. That was Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree Freemason historian from the Phoenix, an illustrated review of occultism and philosophy, and on page 122. Now, let's just see a little bit more about the theosophical view. Okay, so there were other leaders after Blavatsky. There was Annie Besant, but then Alice Bailey was another one who had said, Beaver had said Fetzer was into Alice Bailey. He was absolutely deep into the writings of Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey became a leader of the Theosophical Society, and her husband, Foster, 32nd degree Mason, continued to interlock the workings of Theosophy with the aims of Freemasonry. Bailey is founder of Lucius Trust, which used to be called Lucifer Publishing Company. She originally called it Lucifer Publishing Company. Worked laboriously to fulfill the plan towards a new world religion. That's what she openly wanted. She has the book Externalization of the Hierarchy, all these things, which her master Dwal Kul, that was an entity that she channeled, which her master Dwal Kul had said was the ultimate aim of Freemasonry. The hierarchy had blessed both their beginnings, her master said. Now, let's look at what's the theosophical view of the devil, and then we're going to move on. What's the theosophical view of Satan, of Lucifer? Well, let's hear what Blavatsky said herself. And that means Alice Bailey had the same view. He was viewed as a good guy. She said this: Lucifer represents life, thought, progress, civilization, liberty, independence. Lucifer is the Logos, the serpent, the Savior. H.P. Blavatsky from The Secret Doctrine, page 171, 225, 255, called Lucifer the Savior. And Blavatsky goes on to say in volume 2, Anthropogenesis, she continued to exalt the devil. She said, Satan will now be shown in the teaching of the Secret Doctrine, allegorized as good and sacrifice, a God of wisdom under different names. Good, said the devil was good and a God of wisdom. Blavatsky added, in this case, it is but natural, even from the dead letter standpoint, to view Satan, the serpent of Genesis, as the real creator and benefactor, the father of spiritual mankind. For it is he who was the harbinger of light, bright, radiant Lucifer, who opened the eyes of the automaton created by Jehovah, as alleged, and he was the first to whisper, in the day you eat thereof, you shall be as Elohim, knowing good and evil, can only be regarded in the light of a Savior. Okay? So, Blavatsky praised Lucifer over and over again. And Alice Bailey continued this tradition, called her company Lucifer Publishing Company, obviously viewing Lucifer as good, the light bearer. Remember Albert Pike, the 33rd degree Mason, wrote Morals and Dogma. He said, Lucifer, is it he who bears the light of Masonry? Yeah, doubt it not. It is Lucifer. And I'll show you another quote from Manly P. Hall later, where he's talking about Lucifer in a good light as well. That's the theosophical view. It is satanic to the core. It views, and what I mean by satanic specifically is viewing Satan as good. That is satanic, okay? So there's no separating this. The beliefs of John Fetzer from the Fetzer Institute, and there's no separating the Fetzer Institute from its impact on SEL and helping SEL to be founded and flourishing and pushing it in the educational system. Wouldn't have happened without that, and the funding also of the Fetzer Institute. So why would this guy, Fetzer, and his institute have such an interest in this social emotional learning and emotional intelligence and all these things? Why is that so important to him when it says that the spiritual beliefs were a foundation for this institute? So what about this curriculum is in line with his spiritual beliefs? You have to ask yourself that question. Why does it line up with his spiritual beliefs when you take a look at what these really are? And also the United Nations goals at the same time. Oh, did I forget to mention that Alice Bailey had a connection with the United Nations as well? And even had, gave her a meditation room for Lucius Trust? Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the last section we're going to cover is this other connection, Daniel Goleman and emotional intelligence, because, again, he was funded by the Fetzer Institute, and his concept of emotional intelligence was right in line with their goals for the SEL and all these things. And they say here, the concept of SEL was propelled into popular culture in '95 with a book by New York Times science reporter Daniel Goleman. By the way, he went on to work for New York Times, Daniel Goleman, and then he also just happened to write an article which was about satanic panic, basically saying that satanic ritual abuse doesn't happen, and they examined all these cases and there's no truth to any of it. Interesting. With support from Fetzer, Goleman published Emotional Intelligence, Why Can It Matter More Than IQ? And then it goes on to say, until the release of Emotional Intelligence, which was quickly translated into many languages, there was little contact between educators like me, who were developing school programs to cultivate social and emotional competence in children, with the psychologist and research assistants studying the neurological underpinnings and development of human emotion, said Linda Lentieri, co-founder of the Resolving Conflict Creatively program. Okay, so we see Daniel Goleman's role in all this, right? In emotional intelligence. Well, let's look more into that. Funded by Fetzer. So what we're going to look at now is that there was actually, I had come across some information about this stuff way back in 2015, and I never released this information. Never got a chance to, due to some circumstances that happened back then. But anyways, yes, I came across this thing about emotional intelligence and even mentioned SEL on here way back in 2015. But what happened was, back in 2015, what got me onto this was this event that Lady Gaga did, the pop singer. It's called Lady Gaga Emotion Revolution Summit, which she did at Yale University. So let's read about what happened here. And you might wonder why Lady Gaga was involved with this stuff. Well, if we think about everything we've been talking about, it might not be so weird. Okay, Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. On Saturday, October 24th, 2015, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, home of Skull and Bones, just reminding everyone, it's Skull and Bones Secret Society at Yale. Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and Born This Way Foundation, created by Lady Gaga and her mother, Cynthia Germanata hosted the Emotion Revolution Summit to build awareness of the critical role emotions play in young people's learning, decision-making, academic achievement, and overall wellness. You see, that's what they were saying from the very beginning. It just sounds innocent, right? Sounds good. Oh, it's going to help them deal with emotions. But it's totally lying about what it really is all about. The summit featured panel discussions, workshops, and remarks by advocates, educators, and nearly 200 visiting youth from around the country, and Lady Gaga herself. The event provided a platform for youth participants to share their ideas for creating improved learning environments through workshops and panel discussions. Throughout the day, Lady Gaga encouraged the youth attendants to take their own mental and emotional health seriously and to proactively seek the tools they need to foster well-being. She called on participants to join the conversation around why emotions matter through the hashtag #IamNotJust hashtag on social media. We want to explode the conversation around youth mental health. By the way, you ever see that phrase, youth mental health? Beware, because it's not good. They're talking about all this type of stuff. Explode the conversation around youth mental health so that it's not seen as a fringe issue anymore, said Lady Gaga. Today, a lot bigger than just one event or some social media campaign. Today, it's a lot bigger than that. It's the beginning of making the emotional as well as physical well-being of young people a national issue. And then people go, oh man, it's so great. Lady Gaga cares about the youth and she just wants, she cares about the emotional well-being of the youth. Yeah, that's why she did it, and that's the only reason, and that's just it, because she just cares about that out of the goodness of her heart, and that's it. That's what you are made to believe. Okay? So then they say they did a study with a bunch of young people, and they said, they felt bad and negative emotions when they're in school. Okay, great. Then, they make it about that. Oh, they don't feel good in school and all these things. Then it says Facebook also had a major presence at the event. They launched Inspired, a resource center for high school students and education born out of a partnership between Facebook and the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, designed by educators, teens, and experts in social and emotional learning, SEL. See that? I had this saved back in 2015. I was on to this stuff about SEL. Okay? But it's tied together. See how emotional intelligence is tied together directly with SEL. Inspired is a tool to help high school students and educators work together to create the best possible learning communities. Overall, the hashtag Emotion Revolution generated more than 618 million social media impressions worldwide. And the I Am Not Just hashtag trending globally. And then it, just talks about, Emotion Revolution was made possible by the generous support of Facebook, Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Microsoft, Mattel, Life is Good, Hope Lab, WWE. Of course, wrestling cares about the emotional well-being of children. U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, Flawless Foundation, and the Foss Foundation. Okay, so there was that. And I thought that was highly suspicious, very weird. Lady Gaga being involved in this emotional intelligence event. So what is it? What is emotional intelligence? Let's show a brief overview and then we'll connect it to Daniel Goleman. Emotional intelligence, EI, or emotional quotient, EQ, is the capability of individuals to recognize their own and other people's emotions, to discriminate between different feelings and label them appropriately, to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior, and to manage and or adjust emotions to adapt environments and achieve one's goals. Although the term first appeared in a 1964 paper by Michael Beldock, it gained popularity in the 1995 book by that title, written by the author, psychologist, and science journalist Daniel Goleman. Since this time, Goleman's 1995 theory has been criticized within the scientific community. Let's learn a little bit more about Daniel Goleman. Also remember, funded by Fetzer. Daniel Goleman is an author, psychologist, and science journalist. For 12 years, he wrote for the New York Times, reporting on the brain and behavioral sciences. His 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, was on the New York Times bestseller list for a year and a half. and bestseller in many countries, in print worldwide in 40 languages. Apart from his books on emotional intelligence, Goleman has written books on topics including self-deception, creativity, transparency, meditation, social emotional learning. There it is again, he wrote on SEL, eco-literacy, climate change stuff, and the ecological crisis. And the Dalai Lama's vision for the future. Oh, okay, that's what we need to be listening to. Goleman was born in Stockton, California, the son of free-thinking college professors. He received a scholarship from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to attend Amherst College. The Amherst Independent Scholar Program allowed him to transfer for his junior year to the University of California at Berkeley. He returned to Amherst, where he graduated magna cum laude. He then received a scholarship from the Ford Foundation to attend Harvard University, where he received his PhD studying under David C. McClelland. He studied in India, using a pre-doctoral fellowship from Harvard and a postdoctoral grant from the Social Science Research Council. While in India, he spent time with spiritual teacher Neem Karoli Baba, who was also the guru to Ram Dass, Krishna Das, and Larry Brilliant. He wrote his first book based on travel in India and Sri Lanka. See, Daniel Goleman also was interested in spirituality, mysticism, all these types of things. It wasn't just Fetzer. So they made a good team, right? Who was Neem Karoli Baba? Baba, also known to his followers as Maharajji, was a Hindu guru, mystic, and devotee of the Hindu deity Hanuman. He is known outside India for being the guru of a number of Americans who traveled to India in the 1960s and 70s, the most well-known being the spiritual teachers Ram Dass, Bhagavan Das, and the musicians Krishna Das and Jai Uttal. Also, Steve Jobs, founder of Apple, along with his friend Dan Kotke, traveled to India in April 1974 to study spiritualism. They planned to meet Neem Karoli Baba, but arrived to find he died the previous September. Also, actress Julia Roberts, influenced by Neem Karoli Baba. A picture of him drew Roberts to Hinduism. There you go. And then we're not going to read all this stuff, but a little bit more about Ram Dass. He was a spiritual teacher, author of the seminal 1970 book, Be Here Now, which, by the way, at the end of that book has multiple references to Blavatsky, Alice Bailey. There's another connection to that. And then also, his real name was Alpert, Richard Alpert. And Alpert, he was friends with Timothy Leary. Alpert and Leary experimented with and devoted intensive research to the potentially therapeutic effects of hallucinogenic drugs such as psilocybin, LSD, and other psychedelic chemicals. They continued to co-author a book entitled The Psychedelic Experience, a manual based on the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And that's, of course, other spiritual stuff. But really, this was part of MKUltra because they were dosing people without consent with LSD at Harvard University. Harvard Psychedelic Club. That's exactly what it is. So Ram Dass associated closely with Timothy Leary and this MKUltra stuff. So why are we saying that? Because Neem Karoli Baba was the guru from Ram Dass. So isn't that interesting? And Daniel Goleman, that was the guru for Daniel Goleman as well, the inventor of emotional intelligence. You can read more about that stuff later. Back to Goleman. In his first book, The Varieties of Meditative Experience, Goleman describes almost a dozen different meditation systems. He wrote that the need for the meditator to retrain his attention, whether through concentration or mindfulness, is the single invariant ingredient in the recipe for altering consciousness of every meditation system. Goleman then returned on as a visiting lecturer to Harvard, where during the 1970s his course on the psychology of consciousness was popular. McClelland recommended him for a job at Psychology Today, from which he was recruited to the New York Times. And then Goleman co-founded CASEL, Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning at Yale University's Child Studies Center. He helped to co-found KSEL, the creators of SEL, which then moved to the University of Illinois at Chicago, and currently co-directs Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations at Rutgers University. Sits on the board of the Mind and Life Institute, okay? So we see that Goleman also helped found with SEL, and emotional intelligence we're seeing here was also into this mysticism and spirituality. And if you try to tell me that Goleman and Fetzer their spiritual beliefs did not impact SEL, you are out of your mind. That is ridiculous. It is such an absurd position to hold. Of course it impacted it. And how do I know? Because they admitted it. They said it. And they talk about spiritual things in SEL curriculum. Okay? So now we're going to learn a little bit more about emotional intelligence. Some weird stuff about it. Interesting things. The dark side of emotional intelligence. This was an article written in The Atlantic. And I get the link there for it. And that's what it's called. Check this out. Some of the greatest moments in human history were fueled by emotional intelligence. When Martin Luther King Jr. presented his dream, he chose language that would stir the hearts of his audience. Instead of honoring the sacred obligation to liberty, King thundered, America has given the black people a bad check. He promised that a land sweltering with the heat of oppression could be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice, and envisioned a future which, on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners would be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Delivering this electrifying message required emotional intelligence. By the way, this guy is saying, all these great things about him, but to be honest, he was a socialist. So, that's a fact. Totally a socialist activist. The ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions. Dr. King demonstrated remarkable skill in managing his own emotions and in sparking emotions that moved his audience to action. That's what they want to do, push people to action. As the speechwriter Clarence Jones reflected, King delivered a perfectly balanced outcry of reason and emotion, of anger and hope. His tone of pained indignation matched that note for note. Recognizing the power of emotions, another one of the most influential leaders of the 20th century spent years studying the emotional effects of his body language. Practicing his hand gestures and analyzing images of his movements allowed him to become, quote, an absolutely spellbinding public speaker, says the historian Roger Morehouse. It was something he worked very hard on. His name was Adolf Hitler. Since the 1995 publication of Daniel Goleman's bestseller, Emotional Intelligence has been touted by leaders, policymakers, educators as the solution to a wide range of social problems. If we can teach our children to manage emotions, the argument goes, we'll have less bullying and more cooperation. That's what we say, we got to stop the bullying. And if we have emotional intelligence, it'll stop the bullying. If we can cultivate emotional intelligence among leaders and doctors, we'll have more caring workplaces and more compassionate healthcare. Do we see that happening, by the way? More compassionate healthcare? As a result, emotional intelligence is now taught widely in secondary schools, business schools, and medical schools. Emotional intelligence is important, but the unbridled enthusiasm has obscured a dark side. New evidence shows that when people hone their emotional skills, they become better at manipulating others. When you're good at controlling your own emotions, you can disguise your true feelings. When you know what others are feeling, you can tug at their heartstrings and motivate them to act against their own best interests. They don't talk about that in SEL, do they? That can happen. Social scientists have begun to document the dark side of emotional intelligence. In emerging research led by University of Cambridge professor Joaquin Menges, when a leader gave an inspiring speech filled with emotion, the audience was less likely to scrutinize the message and remembered less of the content. Ironically, audience members were so moved by the speech that they claimed to recall more of it. The authors call this the awestruck effect, but it might just as easily be described as the dumbstruck effect. One observer reflected that Hitler's persuasive impact came from his ability to strategically express emotions. He would tear open his heart And these emotions affected his followers to the point that they would stop thinking critically and just emote. Now that's very interesting, because in SEL, they're saying, oh, we want to think critically, but it's talking about critically thinking means with critical consciousness, according to a neo-Marxist worldview. And they talk about emotional resilience, emotional intelligence, and all these things. They talk about that as if this is going to help them to be healthy and be resilient and all these things. But what they train these kids to do is to actually not logically analyze the information that they're being taught. In fact, I saw one SEL exercise. It was in the curriculum. It was a video. And this teacher was showing children different shapes that had different colors. So you'd say blue square, red square, green triangle, whatever. But they gave the children rules ahead of time saying the colors represent a certain shape. So you can't pay attention to the shape, only the color. And so they show a blue square and they say, oh, what does this represent? And the kid raises his hand and say, circle. And they show a red square. What does this represent? Triangle. It's totally insane. It makes no sense. It's not logical at all. But the kids automatically went along with it because they're playing according to the rules, and the teacher's reinforcing it. She's praising them for following the rules, doing exactly what they say. It's teaching them to listen to the rules and to the teacher over their own logical mind. In their mind, you see a blue square, there's no reason you need to say triangle or circle. It's a square. So it's not logical. It's not thinking critically at all. And, these appeals to emotion, that's what the activists always do. Leaders who master emotions can rob us of our capacities to reason. That's all they do. That's why these libs, activists, always hide behind children. What about the children? What about the marginalized peoples? They hide behind those groups as if they actually care about them. They don't. And they do it to appeal to people's emotions so they feel bad. Oh, I feel bad for these marginalized groups. Oh, woe is them. We need to help them. It's just an emotional appeal. That's it. Because when you actually sit down and think and look through what they're proposing, it's total garbage. Total nonsense. Doesn't make any sense at all. In fact, it makes the problem worse. But they appeal to emotion. If their values are out of step with our own, the results can be devastating. New evidence suggests that when people have self-serving motives, emotional intelligence becomes a weapon for manipulating others. In a study led by University of Toronto psychologist Stephanie Cody, university employees filled out a survey about their Machiavellian tendencies and took a test measuring their knowledge about effective strategies for managing emotions. Then Cody's team assessed how often the employees deliberately undermine their colleagues. The employees who engaged in the most harmful behaviors were Machiavellians with high emotional intelligence. You see that? So it's not some neutral thing where everybody just, if we promote emotional intelligence, everything's going to get better. No, not true at all. This will give the Machiavellian manipulators more tools to manipulate. It will help them. Can't just say, oh, it's just going to help all these problems to go away. Oh, it's going to help to get rid of bullies. No, actually, it's going to help bullies get better at bullying. They use their emotional skills to demean and embarrass their peers for personal gain. In one computer company studied by Tel Aviv University professor Gideon Kunda, a manager admitted to telling a colleague how excited we all are with what he is doing, but at the same time, distancing my organization from the project. So, when it blows up, the company's founder would blame the colleague. Total manipulation. Shining a light in this dark side of emotional intelligence is one mission of a research team led by University College London professor Martin Kilduff. According to these experts, emotional intelligence helps people disguise one set of emotions while expressing another for personal gain. Emotionally intelligent people, quote, intentionally shape their emotions to fabricate favorable impressions of themselves. Professor Kilduff's team writes, quote, the strategic disguise of one's own emotions and the manipulation of others' emotions for strategic ends are behaviors evident not only on Shakespeare's stage, but also in the offices and corridors where power and influence are traded. Okay? So, emotional intelligence, it's not some thing that you just go, oh, well, just to promote this in the education system, promote this in the workplace, and it's going to make everything better. That's not true at all. That's a lie. By the way, there's nothing wrong with emotions. There's nothing wrong with using emotions in speeches and these types of things. What it's talking about is people who have manipulative motivations will use these things to manipulate people. So if they have bad beliefs and they're using this to manipulate people, then obviously it's going to be bad. But not everyone who uses emotion to speak. I mean, if you didn't have any emotion to speak, it'd be really boring. But it's just saying you can't say it's automatically good. It's not. That's not true at all. That brings us to the next point about poker. It's actually pretty interesting. There was an article written about the connection between poker and emotional intelligence. And I'm actually going to connect that back to what we were talking about before. So, poker trains emotional intelligence, makes you a better manipulator. In poker, you must suppress your emotions so that no one else can read you and figure out if you have a good hand or not. You also must be able to read other people's emotions so you can figure out if they have a good hand or not. This is a great exercise in emotional intelligence, which will in turn help the person to be a better manipulator. And that brings us to this article, EQ, The Secret of the Professional Poker Player. This is from CBSNews.com, Secret of Professional Poker Player. I recently read a terrific article about professional poker players in the New Yorker called What Would Jesus Bet? The article features Chris Ferguson, widely regarded by his peers as the best professional poker player in the world, and who is nicknamed Jesus because of his physical appearance. Not a good thing to say. The reporter believes that Ferguson was successful because of his fluency in mathematics, but is corrected by Julio Rodriguez, who writes for cardplayer.com, who says this: a lot of players know the math, but the majority of them go on instinct, or feel, or a read on a player. It seems a lot of them are just born with this sense of games. If you talk to a lot of these guys outside, they're never not playing a game. They're reading you. That's why they're so engaging. They know what people want. It's very easy for them to please you. They also know how to deceive. In addition, Ferguson is like a robot. You get nothing from watching him. In other words, the most successful poker player in the world has absolute control of emotions, spends his time trying to work out what are the emotional drives of his fellow players, and builds relationships with them by knowing how both to please and deceive. Is this not steps 2, 3, and 4 of Goleman's model of emotional intelligence? The person with high emotional intelligence is someone who has good self-control of his emotions, high empathy, and able to build successful relationships. By the way, there is a difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy can be weaponized and can be used by total Machiavellians. Empathy just means you can sense other people's emotions, but it doesn't mean you feel bad for them. You see that? So empathy can be weaponized. Of course, quoted passage also applies to one of my favorite characters in business, corporate psychopaths, or snakes in suits. 3 reasons poker players have the highest emotional intelligence. Okay, so that was just a little bit from the secret of the professional poker player, the best poker player in the world, high emotional intelligence. And then here's one more. 3 reasons poker players have the highest emotional intelligence. It's a game of psychological and emotional warfare. This is from Inc.com. And it says, poker can teach us a thing or two about business, but it has also been regarded as a game of psychological and emotional warfare. There's a reason for that. Poker players possess exceptionally high emotional intelligence that pushes them to the top of the list. Here's why. They've mastered emotional control and discipline. Poker has serious emotional swings. Imagine starting out with 10,000 chips and you double up to 20,000 with a great hand. It's almost a euphoric feeling when the dealer gives you your chips. On the other hand, pun intended, say you're on the losing end and your 10,000 chip stack goes down to 1,000 after some really bad luck. The opposite feeling occurs. You feel broken. You immediately go into the abyss of paralysis by analysis and have to fight the urge to immediately go all in with subpar cards because you're mad. You're steaming, aka tilting. Poker players anticipate these swings, acknowledge them, but don't let their emotions take over. They stay in control. The next point, they have an advanced ability to read body language. The ability to read body language is a huge aspect of emotional intelligence. Poker players are acutely aware of this and try to extract anything from a player that would allow them to make a more informed decision. Are they making or avoiding eye contact? Have their breathing patterns changed? Can you see their pulse throbbing in their neck? Are they talking more or less? Alternatively, they know they'll be on the receiving end of a player trying to read them too. So they equally need to be aware of their body language and be emotionally poised, which is having a poker face, right? That's where it talks about that. And they know every hand counts. In Texas Hold'em, you average about 18 to 25 hands per hour playing live poker. If you play online, that easily doubles or even triples. So whether you're playing in a hand or not, every hand provides a new, fresh opportunity to hone your emotional intelligence and put it to work. Poker players take advantage of this, and whether they're right or wrong, are continuously able to practice with every hand that is dealt. If you've never played poker before and you intend on playing at the World Series of Poker in July, poker players are hands down at the top of the emotional intelligence food chain. Okay, so again, we see this how guys who play poker have really high emotional intelligence. Does that mean that automatically spreading emotional intelligence will just have this net benefit in society? No, of course not. These guys are gambling. They're trying to make a lot of money, and they're benefiting off people losing a bunch of money, and they're having emotional control in that situation. Emotional intelligence isn't some positive force you just spread around and now everything's going to be better in society when we spread around emotional intelligence. That's a lie. And we can also see the specific way it's being used in education is even worse. Now, just so interesting to see this next point, which is Lady Gaga, who was at the Emotional Intelligence Summit at Yale University. Guess what her first big single was? The song was called Poker Face. Now you think there's a connection here? Well, what does she say in the lyrics? I want to hold 'em like they do in Texas, please. Fold 'em, let 'em hit me, raise it, baby, stay with me. Love game, intuition, play the cards with spades to start. And after he's been hooked, I'll play the one that's on his heart. Can't read my, no, he can't read my poker face. What is she talking about? That's the manipulative use of emotional intelligence. And she said she's using emotion to manipulate a man. She hooks him in, plays the card on his heart. She'll mess with his heart, hook him in, but he can't read her poker face and what she's thinking and how she's feeling. Just a weird coincidence, right? Talking about this whole thing. And then the final quote for the teaching, and then I'm going to end with some spiritual stuff, biblical stuff, is a quote from Manly P. Hall. We're talking about Freemasonry and emotional intelligence. This is a quote from Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree Freemason historian, from his book, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, or The Secret of Hiram Abiff. Listen to what he says about mastering emotional intelligence, basically. The day has come when fellow craftsmen must know and apply their knowledge. The lost key to their grade is the mastery of emotion, which places, now what does he say this is? Which places the energy of the universe at their disposal. Okay, so the lost key to this specific grade in Freemasonry is the master of emotion. And then he says the mastery of emotion is placing the energy of the universe at his disposal. Then listen later what he talks about this energy. What he says about it. Man can only expect to be entrusted with great power by proving his ability to use it constructively and selflessly. When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands, and before he may step onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy. He must follow in the footsteps of his forefather Tubal-Cain, who with the mighty strength of the war god hammered his sword into a plowshare. You see that? So again, tying this emotional intelligence with Freemasonry, calls it the tapping into the seething energies of Lucifer. And of course, we go back to Fetzer, and he was into Manly P. Hall, Alice Bailey, Blavatsky. He was a 33rd degree Mason. All these things, communicating with spirits. And then all of a sudden, he wants to put all this money behind pushing out emotional intelligence, SEL curriculum on all the kids. United Nations wants to push it. And just so happens there's all these connections to, there's these Luciferian connections. It's all proven right in front of you. I give you the quotes. This isn't speculation. It's exactly what they say. It's in writing. You can't deny it. And so let's end the teaching with this. I'm going to read some verses here. This is from 2 Corinthians chapter 11, starting in verse 13. For such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. And this is what you need to see. I'm warning you, whatever your beliefs are, the Word of God gives you this warning. Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. And of course, that's why they love going by his name, Lucifer, as the light bearer. Okay? The light bringer, the light bearer, Lucifer. That's what they like to call him. But it says he's transformed into an angel of light. He comes to you as something good, as an angel of light. That's what SEL does. Emotional intelligence, all the people that push it, they come to you, they present it as something good, that it's going to help children, it's going to help society, it's going to do all these good things. But underneath it is totally evil and satanic and subversive. The Bible tells you right there. Satan has always masqueraded as an angel of light, trying to portray himself as someone that is helping humanity. It went all the way back to the Garden of Eden. He was doing the same thing. He's acting like he's helping humanity. Oh, he's helping Eve. Oh, you won't die if you eat that. You shall be as gods. It's the same lie today. You shall be as gods. I will give you the knowledge and the power and all these things. Presenting himself as good. But it's absolutely evil. And you should not be deceived. The Bible says lest Satan should get an advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. You should not be ignorant of his devices. And SEL and emotional intelligence and all these things are absolute devices of Satan to manipulate people in society, especially children. That's why it's so evil. Going after innocent children to indoctrinate them and make them neo-marxist global citizens who support every agenda that they're pushing. And to make them reject biblical Christianity and all the morality and the traditional, all their traditions. It's very evil. And so you need to see through this deception. And also educate yourself through, not only through this, continue to educate yourself more about what this is and call it out. That's why the Bible says, and have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather reprove them. That means don't participate in the works of darkness. Don't yoke up with it, participate in it, work with it, but instead separate from it and then call it out. That's what reprove means. Blame to the face. Say, hey, look it, this is bad. Here's why it's bad, and show the proof. Don't just give a theory and speculation. We're not giving opinion here. We got all the facts documented. Show people. Say, here it is. You can go look it up yourself. You go read exactly what they say, and you'll see it. And that's reproving the unfruitful works of darkness. And it's a very evil thing and a dark thing that they're doing with this SEL. And it is absolutely fulfilling the plan of Alice Bailey and the Luciferians to get people part of this global. Why would they say global citizen when there's no global government? Because that's what they want. And they're making the children to accept this coming system and power. That's what they're doing. That's what they're preparing the world for. That's what the Bible warns about. The man of sin, the beast system, and all these things. You better watch out, because that's exactly where this is going. And if you have not been born again, you better get that settled soon. Very soon, because this is all heading in a very dark direction. You better make sure you make peace with God soon. Repent of a life of sin and rebellion against God. Put your faith in Jesus Christ. Understand He took your sin, the punishment for your sin. He rose again from the dead. He shed His precious blood for you. Put your faith in Him. Repent and put your faith in Him. You will be saved. You will be forgiven of your sins. You will be born again, which means to be supernaturally transformed. To be changed into a new person. To be given a new heart with new desires. If any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. That's what you need. And you have no protection from the devil unless you are saved. I'm just warning you right now, you don't. God takes care of His children. If you are not born again, you are not one of His children. We are all children by faith in Jesus Christ. That's what the Bible says. And I hope you listen to that. And also, everyone else and the Christians, make sure you're paying attention to what they're teaching the kids. Obviously, try to educate them at home. If you can't do that, try to do private. And if you can't do that and they have to go to public indoctrination, then you're going to have to do debriefings when they come home. And you're going to say, okay, what'd you learn today? Well, I learned about emotional resilience and all this stuff. And you're going to have to explain, okay, this is why that's wrong. Here's what the truth is. And that's just what you're going to have to do. But that's your responsibility. But you need to be educated first, not ignorant of these things going on. Okay? Now, giving you all the resources you need. So don't be ignorant. And don't let them indoctrinate your kids into this stuff and you don't even know what it is. Next thing you know, they're older, and you wonder, why did they reject all your beliefs? Well, it's no surprise. It's no surprise at all when you send them to listen to this stuff. Can't allow that unchallenged. Okay, so that's that. Hope that was helpful and a blessing to you. Thanks for watching and listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. Especially go to the description and subscribe to the Telegram feed, where you're going to get all the PDFs of the notes, uncensored news, and find all the updates there. Thank you for all the support, all the prayers.